Well, hello, Aubrey, Lilana, Clayton, Claire, Zach, Mateus, Charles. Thank you so much for your gift to society that is Arkadia. I am Milan Bender in Dallas, Texas, and I want to share with you my knowledge concerning eco-technologies and the secret revolution, unifying spirit and science once and for all in unity again, and returning man to its proper place in the web of life. You've done a great job of assembling so many great minds in so many categories of economics, permaculture, education, communication, justice, politics, business. And yet I see one little hole that I can help fill for you when it comes to spiritual technologies, eco-technologies, technologies that work with nature instead of against it. I'd like to offer my gift in the spirit of the gifting economy that you have so beautifully performed for us, and give you a talk. Usually takes 45 minutes for this talk, but I know y'all are busy preparing for Arkadia, and thank you so much for that. The name of this talk is the Technology of the Arcadians. In this talk, we're going to cover why it's important, what it is, how we do it, and what's next. Today, I'll be sharing with you a deeper understanding of the unity of science and spirituality that will revolutionize our world in millions and millions of ways. You see, science without spirituality is materialism, and spirituality without science is superstition. You can't fully understand one without the other, but when you meld the two together, when you unite them, you harness, access, and ride the waves of eternal energy that is our universe. Now, my family personally has been working with vortex implosion for over 38 years. We've come across many great scientists, inventors, and great minds, all reclusive, all keeping out of the public eye, and for good reason. Does anybody out here in the audience know of Nikola Tesla? Raise your hand. Yeah. He died broke and alone because he didn't have the support of a community. He was relying on the big banks to fund him. And once they realized what he was up to, they weren't so happy to fund his free energy revolution or 0-point energy. Is anybody familiar with Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Viktor Schauberger. Viktor was a master of observing nature and understanding the true beauty of how nature works. Viktor Schauberger died after signing a contract, signing away all of his inventions, all of his ideas, both in the present and anything he would come up with. He died alone and broken, trying to help the world and give back to all of the world the technology of nature. The technology that the ancients knew so well. The reason we can't explain so many things that happened in the past because our technology has moved so far away from nature and views it as a resource, something to take advantage of, something to utilize without thinking about the consequences and the results of it. Has anyone heard of Aaron Salter, a recent one? A guy who was able to figure out the holy grail of electrolysis and running an engine off of water because he learned what to do with the brown goo that's made whenever you produce hydrogen. He recently died in a shooting in Buffalo, New York. Has anybody in the audience heard of Royal Raymond Rife and the Rife machine? Also had a life full of FBI raids, lawsuits, and everybody who studied his work after him came under some type of government intervention, taking all their documents and research. Dr. Lakowski, Eugene Malone, Max Gerson, Nathan Stubblefield, Albert Abrams, all these people Same story over and over again. You see, the thing is that we don't have a lack of technology or brilliant minds. What we have a lack of is a society that puts that knowledge in the public sphere, that supports and funds these amazing, brilliant people to progress and further society as a whole. There's not much money to be made in these eco-technologies, the capitalists say. Big oil at $2.9 trillion a year industry doesn't want to give up their hold on power and money. Big pharma doesn't want to give up their monopoly on health, and the government doesn't want to give up their monopoly on power. It's up to us. None of them are going to do it for us. It's up to us to build up the Library of Alexandria, to support those inventors, mad scientists, and pioneers of these new technologies, and to protect them. And that's why we're here, isn't it? To build Arkadia, to build this new world, this beautiful new world, where we can once again have a renaissance. Because you see, what happened in the Renaissance period was the fact that there were so many that were a jack of all trades and a master of none, better than a master of one. Because everything in life is truly interconnected. Specialists, like we have nowadays, boxes of heart specialists, lung specialists, all look at their one little box. Of course, they can't ever fully understand their box without understanding the whole. But it's too complex, people say. We just couldn't understand everything. We've limited ourselves with our limiting beliefs that it's impossible to connect the dots and make sense of the complex universe we're in. Yet, the universe operates on some very simple principles and patterns. And for you, as the general public, you may not be a scientist or inventor. You may not need to have this knowledge for your daily life. What you can do is support the people that do. What you can do is rally behind the people that will bring these to you, and then be able to support and purchase and invest your time in promoting these technologies. I'm going to break it down so simply, as so many things can be. Because the world is this fractal universe, you can understand a fractal and understand how the rest of the complexity builds out of it. Everything starts with unity and oneness, and then multiplies and multiplies and multiplies and becomes this more complex creation. And it's beautiful. Take, for instance, health. Did you know there are only 2 root causes for every single disease? I like to pull this one whenever I see some type of medical worker or paramedics, and I ask them, what are the 2 root causes of every disease? Of course, they look at me kind of funny and think, nah, there couldn't be 2, that's too simple. But when you tell them it's a lack or an excess, too much of something or too little of something, it starts to click in their head. Sure, that's an oversimplification, but it's a proper framework to be able to start looking at our problems and getting down to the root causes. Today I'm going to break down the root causes of technology and where we went wrong, or where we've utilized too much of one type of force of nature. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the yin-yang symbol, and it's a beautiful symbol of balance, of flow. It shows us that in our world there are 2 primary forces, which of course are 2 sides of the same coin. It's necessary to understand the very basic principles of yin and yang to understand eco-technology. Later in the talk, we'll go more into the power of 369 and what Tesla had discovered, the pattern of numbers, the language of nature, which will help you to understand and comprehend a little better what I'm talking about. So in yin and yang, you have 2 different forces. Yin force, which is the negative, the darkness, the nothingness, the unseen, the invisible, the animating axis behind all living life that intertwines to infinity, is the force of the female and the force of life. It is the organizing, cooling force of nature. There's also the counterbalance force, which is the yang force, the positive, the masculine, the sun. The yang force is the energy of heat, radiation, chaos. Because for you to have order, you have to have chaos to order out of. Once you have enough order, you can generate chaos for a regenerative cycle. It's a flow both in electricity, in consciousness, in our bodies, in our cells, as above, so below. The microcosm and the macrocosm. So these concepts are not limited to one particular field or one particular aspect. It is what intertwines and weaves and connects the dots in the toroidal force of life for all of us. Now I want you to understand that if you get a little lost and it's a little over your head, that's okay. I don't expect all of you to be scientists, inventors, theologians. Just be you. The important thing to remember is that once everybody has a very low level understanding of these concepts, you'll understand why it's so important to support and represent, share, and finance these endeavors like this. Whenever you see them, you'll be able to recognize them, so you know that it's a healthy way to regenerate our world, to bring peace and unity back, even in technology. I think a lot of people have this concept in their mind of technology and of progress in the world, and we say, well, we've got all this pollution, and some people would say go back to the Stone Ages and get rid of the cars and the planes, and I would have to give up all my technology that I love so much to fix the world's problems of global warming and water shortages. And that's not true. That's the beautiful thing when you understand this concept, is that you realize you can really have your cake and eat it too. You realize that you don't have to stop traveling, flying through the air. All you have to do is utilize a different force of technology to do it. How many of you have ever heard of implosion, vortex mechanics, vortex math? Okay, that is all the yin force. And what we have done currently, where we are at in our society, is that most every way that we extract electricity and energy is through the yang force. We use explosion technology in our gas combustion engines and our planes. In most things we do, we are exploding or causing radiant heat. Truly, pollution can be seen as overutilization of one type of energy or one force of nature. And what I'm going to present to you today, because you're so familiar with explosion technology, I don't have to explain too much. What's not familiar and what most people struggle with is the concept of implosion. Instead of explosion, which is from the inside outward, when you complete the cycle, it's from the outside inward. Implosive. Implosion's counterclockwise force of motion. It's the energy flowing this way, and explosion is the energy flowing that way. And they are two forces that are necessary. Just like gravity is keeping you grounded on the earth, there is also another backflow of energy called levity going the opposite way. If you were to shield gravity and get rid of light, heat, oxygen, the yang forces of nature that cause the flow that we call gravity, you would have natural levity. When you create an umbrella from the forces flowing this way, things naturally go this way. It's very interesting. Now, implosion is the ability to understand the invisible forces of nature that flow in a certain direction. For instance, in an airplane, what we do currently is we take gas, our jet fuel, and we thrust it out the back, which propels us forward. That forward motion is fighting against the charged air particles, the force of nature, and building up heat on the wings and resistance on the plane. Tesla, in his recently released papers from the FBI that were confiscated from his lab, showed a patent for a craft that utilized implosion technology. How this worked, just for a high-level brief description, was that he had a craft and these metal chambers that held noble gases. He had microwave radiation hitting those chambers, creating a specific charge on the front of the ship. Now that charge, let's say negative charge, and you have positively charged air molecules, will cause them to attract like the north and south pole of a magnet. What he realized is that you could have a plane that flies by sucking itself forward. When you really understand the mechanics of a black hole, which is the universe's implosion force, versus the sun, which is the explosion force, you have an input and you have an output, and it's in an eternal loop. That's why they've been burning for billions of years. Nature has figured out zero-point energy and energy recycling, that it will always exist eternally in this infinite loop. When you understand how to utilize black hole mechanics in a small version, because remember, in the macrocosm and microcosm, the same principles are the animating forces. The only difference is the scale at which they operate. So, flying an implosion airplane would mean that you're cooling the earth, you're cleansing the air, and you're doing it with the least amount of resistance. Implosion is said by Viktor Schauberger to be 127 times more powerful than explosion. It would completely revolutionize our economy for the next 100 or hundreds of years to start implementing this technology. It would mean that we would start to rebalance the energies of Earth, which cause chaos and disunity, which break things apart. Now we have to remember that things are not intrinsically good or bad. They are just tools or just methods. The intention, the balance, is what makes them good or bad. Because everything in balance in its place, for example, explosion technology, or the explosive force of nature, the yang force, is there to break down a tree when it falls in the forest. Trees provide thousands of species their life, and it's very important that they decay and turn back into their most basic components and return to the dirt that new life can come. So it is a valuable force of nature that is highly necessary. So we shouldn't demonize it. But what we have to understand is that if all of our technology turns the air particles into the yang force of nature, it means that we're propagating more of that destruction than we need to, more than is necessary and should exist at that level. And I say should exist because ultimately the earth is our home and we are part of the web of life. When we forget that, when we get disconnected, when we become specialists with our blinders on as a racing horse, going straight forward without taking in the all beautiful web of life, we forget to look at how one action goes out and comes back to us. Everything comes back. Maybe some people call it karma, that the energy that we utilize and manifest goes out into the environment, sometimes consolidating, like in the sense of batteries having mercury in them and you think you throw it away, and that there's some a way to which you can throw something in nature. As Barry Commoner says in the 4 Laws of Ecology, there is no a way to which you can throw something. That battery and the mercury inside of it accumulates in the bacteria in the soil and in the water and the algae. When the fish in the water, the worms, absorb it, they now have 10 times more of that mercury in them. When the birds eat them, they now have 20 times more, and so on and so on. and it compounds and consolidates throughout nature to the point by the time it gets to us and gets in our food source, because everything's connected, there's a ridiculous level that's totally unsafe. So we have to understand that what we put out there comes back. We have to understand that by utilizing explosion technology for every aspect of our lives, we've done ourselves and the world a disservice. Marco Rodin discovered the language of nature once again. And I say once again because so many ancient cultures have already discovered this, and it's very evident once you understand it. Once you dig into it, you will see the signs and the symbols of the Celts. You will see that the ancient Egyptians knew this. It becomes very, very obvious that we, throughout the past 4 phases of humanity, from beginning to end of a cycle, we have known, then forgotten, then remembered this technology. I believe we're at the point in the wheel and the cycle that we're currently in, the 4th cycle. We're at the midpoint. We're at the point where it goes from the lowest vibration in the dark ages and starting to come upon the age of Aquarius and enlightenment. The age where we no longer come from survival mode, fear mode. The age where we realize our true potential as humans once again, that we may complete the cycle, and it may be so, and start over. Me personally, because so many things can be ethereal, and we can have these great spiritual guidance, but the beauty of this union of science and spirituality is that we not only have great spiritual epiphanies, but we also know what to do practically in our daily lives to implement this. It's not only a spiritual concept, it's both spiritual and material. It is a perfect union of both. Personally, my last 30 years of research have been into creating living water. And living water that heightens or raises the vibration of everyone who drinks it. 50% of the world's health problems are related to chronic dehydration. Most of the deaths that happen in the world are related to people with a lack of access to clean water. There's so much that can be solved just through water, which is why it's my area of expertise that I love so much. I'm going to explain to you how we apply implosion technology to water. There are other experts like Nassim Haramein that are doing research into this in the quantum field. There are other people like Dan Winter who are doing research into this also into water, growth, agriculture. I deal with water for human consumption. So what we do is we purify water. Most water you find out there is living, dead water. Now, you have physical contaminants in water. Let's say you have this calcium, and calcium gets surrounded by water, and now it's dissolved in solution, so it can't bond to other calcium ions. You can go through a process of reverse osmosis or distillation and strip that calcium out. Now you can test the water and there's no calcium. So you have removed the material component. But that water had a certain electrical charge, the yin force. Because of that calcium ion, it was organized and orchestrated a certain way. The 2 hydrogen molecules or atoms were spinning a certain way and connected to other ones, creating a chunk of water surrounding that calcium. Once we've removed the calcium, we still have the frequency imprint, the memory, the vibrational characteristics of what was there. That's why you've heard it said before that drinking distilled water can leach things from your body, because that water is hungry to fill the hole you've created. It's not enough to just remove the physical contaminant from the water. You need to change the structure of the water. We have to remember that in the world there is nothing but vibration, different densities of light. We know that when we knock on a hard table, we say, but it is real, I can feel it. We also know by zooming in with an electron microscope that that table has lots of little atoms and they are spinning around very rapidly. and it's mostly empty space, like 99% empty space. So you're really seeing energy moving so rapidly that it appears still. And just like a fan spinning fast, you know there's gaps in the fan blades, but you can't put your finger through them because they're spinning too rapidly. Such is material. It is God, consciousness, source, pure creative energy, step down through the throttling valves of the different dimensions or densities, and being able to exist in a low enough vibration that you have this material construct you call your body. Our body is a throttling valve for spirit, divine energy. So, after we physically purified the water, we do a number of things to erase the vibrational memory, change the structure, break it back down into smaller clusters of water, and ultimately give it a negative charge, creating living water. Water that you would find in a healthy spring in nature. Water that we were intended to drink as human beings, that our body was made to thrive off of. Water that we are returning to the discovery of how to create synthetically, and ultimately one day we'll be able to drink from the streams and rivers of life again. So with water, a magnetic field is one way that you can start to, we flow water through a pipe, and there's intense magnetic array around it, and that magnetic array is emitting a magnetic field, which does this invisibly. And that magnetic field causes the water molecules of hydrogen and oxygen to start to spin and flow a certain way. Water is really a liquid crystal. Granite, metal, all water actually. But that's another talk. So once you have started to erase the vibrational input, there's one more thing I forgot. In nature, have you ever seen a 90-degree bend in the rivers and lakes and flow of nature? Do you ever see a river that goes like this, and then like this, and then like this? No. You always see a river that goes like this, like a snake. It wiggles and wanders. And that's because the water is actually vortexing this way and that way, this way and that way. That's nature's way, a preferred flow form of water. The flow form that brings the ethereal spiritual energy into the water by creating a vacuum for the invisible forces to be sucked into physical reality that ride along with that flow form. So in our modern society, we have done a lot of 90-degree bends, which don't even make sense mechanically, interestingly enough. You lose 5 pounds of pressure per each 90. It doesn't make sense even from a material perspective, and it certainly doesn't make sense from a spiritual perspective, because the energy of water flows with it. So if you have the energy of water flowing straight and smashing a wall, you're creating chaos. You're creating explosion. It radiates out the life force of the water, and it has to redirect and flow this way. So people like Viktor Schauberger designed pipes with little things that spiral the water, twisting and bending like it wants to. And when you do that, some really amazing things happen. So let me explain this part of the process. Personally, the way that we do it is we add oxygen to our water. Now, most common water that you will find, we tested distilled water, tap water, smart water. We've tested Dasani, Mount Valley, all waters that don't claim to be oxygenated waters, so that's all right. But to establish a baseline for our testing, all these waters had 7 to 10 milligrams per liter of oxygen, dissolved oxygen content. Ours has 30 milligrams per liter in pure water with only 5 parts per million of total dissolved solids, and the oxygen actually is stable for up to 4 months. Although I would say that the main benefit from the water only lasts one of the main benefits of the water only lasts 3 or 4 days, which is the negative electrical charge on the water itself. Because you have to understand that our body is negatively charged. And if we can add more negative ions to a negatively charged body, we increase our energy potential, our healing potential. So we want to increase the negative voltage, and that lasts about 3-4 days. Now we can negatively charge the oxygen molecule, which is ideal. Again, it's yin and yang, positive, negative, plus, minus, right? So with the oxygen, we have a tank of oxygen. We run it through an ozone generator. And all an ozone generator does is it takes high voltage electricity, passes the oxygen through that field, and the oxygen now gains an extra charge. So I'm trying to keep this simple and not too technical and speak in terms that everyone can understand here, because I really want this to soak in as much as possible. So that oxygen, which was O2, now becomes O3. That oxygen is injected through a venturi into a pipe as the water flows by. So it's sucking it in, and then it's spinning it around and around and around. Now, as far as understanding the flow inside of a vortex, a tornado, hurricane, the outside perimeter is moving slow relative to as it goes down towards the center. It rotates more rapidly, more rapidly. And that causes a few things to happen. One, the hydrogens and the way that they spin, the pattern of the energy of nature, which is so vitally important, is orchestrated in tune with nature. The other thing that happens is because you have water spinning slowly on the outside and then more rapidly on the inside, you actually have different layers of water spinning at different speeds. Now you can't see it because the water is clear, it's liquid crystalline. And what you have happening, I'll demonstrate with my hands, is that water is going and it's shearing. Now, shearing is important because water, just like food, can be in big chunks or little chunks. And everyone knows you're supposed to chew your food, right? Yeah, your mom probably always told you, chew your food real good. Everyone knows it's more beneficial, that the more you can chew it in smaller chunks, easier to assimilate. Eventually that food's got to be broken down into the most tiny little colloidal sized molecules anyways. So water you can't chew. So we want to let nature chew and cleanse water for us ideally, because water truly is a self-cleansing molecule. Just by the nature of the way it flows, it's nature's way of cleansing the air, cleansing the earth, and then shedding off those, I would say contaminants, but really elements. And those elements feed the life in the river and in the worms and on out to the rest of the world. It's a beautiful cycle if you don't interfere with it. It works magically and perfectly, and everyone would have clean water everywhere. If we didn't redirect the veins and think we knew better than nature, if we didn't build dams, the world wouldn't be heating up as much as it is. You have to understand that, a metaphor maybe. So in the human body, we have veins of blood flowing throughout, and they do so many beautiful functions, and they keep us alive. Well, the veins of Mother Earth are the rivers and streams. The blood of Mother Earth, so to speak, is water. It is the cooling system, the connecting system, the organizing system of life. If you were to tell someone, I'm no doctor, I don't know anything about the way that the arteries work and the veins work, but I thought it would be a great idea if we just decided to surgically puddle up this vein here and create an artificial lake. Or let's go ahead and block this vein and create an artificial dam. Without the knowledge of the body and the intricate system, why would you go messing with your veins and risk changing the natural way that they flow? I don't think anybody would. And yet we've done that very thing with water. We've decided we know better than nature, and we're going to manipulate it to no end and see what happens. And now we are seeing what happens. We're seeing what happens in California. We're seeing what happens all over the world, where water that used to be there is no longer. We've made the earth sick by our lack of understanding of these eco-technologies, by the lack of understanding the natural way and purpose for nature and how it flows. We can make life-giving technology. We don't have to give up our planes, cars, and boats. We don't have to suffer through a horrible economy that's not thriving because of the lack of innovation. We don't have to accept that there are no solutions. I've only been able to give you a little taste, just a sampling, just to whet your appetite. It's going to take more education knowledge in these fields. But the most important thing that we have to do first, the way that it all starts, is public awareness. People need to realize that there are solutions, solutions that don't counteract nature, solutions that work with nature, solutions that cleanse and cool the earth, solutions that raise our vibration and our spirituality. We can have our technology. We can utilize the force of nature that helps promote Arkadia. So follow along with me on this journey. Join me in supporting, representing, and sharing those brilliant minds that live among us, that are in hiding, the people that I know that won't let me videotape them for fear of what might happen to them if the government found out, for fear of what might happen if their technology actually works. Because we live in a beautiful world already, and there are many out there who are doing amazing things. All we need is for the majority of the public to understand enough to know that these are the solutions of Arkadia. Thank you.